just go ahead and get started. Mike, first of all, thank you so much for being here at the Leadership Breakfast.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Most definitely. And what I want to do, I want to thank Jonathan Kaiser first and foremost, because you know Jonathan, I know Jonathan, but people are joining us from all over the country right now, not just Arizona. If you're outside Arizona, you may not know this great man. But bar none,
Jonathan's awesome.
He's amazing. I mean, you look him up and you see commercial realty and you're like, okay, he's a commercial realtor, but he's not. I mean, he's the guy who, when a lot of people say, what can I be doing to help you? They don't mean it. When JK says it, all day, every day, he's going to find ways to help.
Absolutely.
So
he's really helped develop my network in a short period of time. He's
nice.
Awesome.
Yeah, he's just a good human and an author, 2 great books, and I'm sure he's got a third in the works. But he introduced the two of us, so I just wanted to give a shout out to JK first and foremost for making that connection happen.
Absolutely.
As I mentioned to you when we first spoke, Mike, we've been doing these leadership meetings, we call them now. We used to call them a breakfast because we served eggs and bacon at these in person, but we've been doing it for 18 years. And like I said, we were doing them in person. As soon as we went to Zoom, this version has been incredible because it opens up, the opportunity for us to have an impact on a greater audience, to bring your story, your message to a larger audience. But we're going to do this as a complement to our Austin, Phoenix, and Vegas locations as we go.
Sure.
But thank you again for being here. And I just want to encourage everyone who's here, as you have questions, as things come up, please feel free to add a question into the chat or Q&A area at any point in time. This is a conversational deal that we're running here. It's not a presentation. It's very much a conversation.
If you have questions about how can you be successful with crooked teeth and a receding hairline, I am your guy.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're doing crooked teeth and receding hairline justice today, the two of us.
Yes. Love it.
So our guest, I haven't properly introduced you, but our guest today is Mike Abramson, and Mike is the COO of Xponential Fitness. It's the largest curator of unique fitness brands in the world. So there's 8, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's currently 8 different concepts, basically, Mike, that you have. AKT, Stretch Lab, Cyclebar, Yoga 6, Pure Barre, Club Pilates, Stride, and Row House.
Yep.
And are there 1,800 franchises currently?
Yeah, we have 1,800 open locations, and we have just somewhere around 3,500 or 3,300 sold territories. So we are on a growth curve. We opened 250 during the pandemic.
Wow. That's amazing. And the company started in 2017, correct?
Right. Yeah. Anthony did a great job launching us.
Yeah. That truly is exponential. It's properly named.
The original name was supposed to be BIF because some private equity guys were the ones thinking of it. And BIF stands for Big Ideas in Fitness Franchising, maybe the worst name on the planet.
It's pretty bad.
So very glad they ended up with Xponential.
Yeah, Biff brings me to Back to the Future days and not good memories. So we'll get more into your background as to how you landed where you are today, Michael. But I wanted, and there's going to be some very specific things, like I told those who are attending today, there's going to be very specific things that I want to touch on. But just to give us some history of Xponential, give us a little bit of history of how it operates. So it's essentially the parent company for all of those brands. But like I was telling you earlier, I've watched a couple of your interviews, and that's really not how you don't look at it as a parent. You look at it more as a support function, correct?
Right. Yeah. I mean, we really look at it as we're a foundational program that the brands get to layer on top of and take advantage of shared resource. So we want the presidents to be as autonomous as possible, because every concept has a little bit of its own personality, and we don't want to homogenize it by Expo saying and doing everything, and B, We don't want to crush the entrepreneurial spirit of our presidents, because they're phenomenal entrepreneurs in their own right. And so we want them to lead and grow the system. We're just trying to remove some of the early obstacles and then maybe consolidate some costs.
Right. Okay. And, there's several industries, obviously, that got impacted negatively through what we've been going through, which is almost exactly a year today. How have you guys, you said you grew during the pandemic and you're interacting with all these entrepreneurs who, started their own gyms, started their own franchise operations. How have you helped them navigate? And I guess first and foremost, what was the reaction that you guys first had when everything shut down?
Is cursing allowed on this?
Sure.
I think when the Stafford Act was invoked on March 13th, and then the first shutdown came, everyone was like, what the fuck is going on? It probably took us about a week to realize this was more serious than people expected. And then really we had an unbelievably aggressive acceleration of our virtual platform. We already had virtual going and we had some extensions being built out, but we accelerated that because we knew at minimum we were going to need a hybrid of brick and mortar and virtual. And then we needed to flip the revenue flow from on the virtual side from being corporate oriented to being franchisee oriented, because franchisees needed a way to drive revenue while they were limited in their ability to service their brick and mortar customers. It took us a minute to learn that, right? There were some lessons that were easy and apparent right up front, and there were some that we had to get real-time feedback from franchisees. And we started doing Monday, Wednesday, Friday, total system webinars with Anthony, so that our system could hear what we were doing, how we were trying to support them. We hit go on the real estate side right away and had our VP of real estate, Adam Pennington, who's phenomenal, start reaching out to all of the REITs that we work with and every large regional landlord to say, okay, what can we start doing on rent abatement, deferment, because that's the largest fixed expense that was recurring, and force majeure and leases typically don't relieve the economic obligations under the lease. And so Adam and his team did a phenomenal job negotiating with the REITs and other landlords to alleviate some of the pain of the franchisees, restructuring leases or getting deferrals. And so we helped on the immediate rev gen side with some of the virtual element. Then franchisees came up with some of their own concepts, like renting out the bikes at a Cyclebar studio, right, to their members to take home and do workouts. And then because we had virtual program, they were able to do the virtual program with the actual in-studio bike at their home. And so we're helping maintain members so they're not turning off the tap. And then on the fixed expense side, we negotiated relief for the leases, so we were decreasing their expenses. And then, interestingly enough, when I was in private practice, I'm an attorney by trade. I used to not tell anyone ever because no one wanted to talk to me. And I had self-esteem issues from it. I actually worked in a boutique defense firm, and the managing partner I supported had a PhD in epidemiology. And so I started digging really hard into the epidemiological studies around it, and I became the internal voice for Xponential on how we were handling this, how to actually read the CDC numbers, understand vectors, what do we need to do to protect our franchisees when they do reopen, how do we keep our home office still operating functionally without putting anyone in danger. And then also just knowing the science behind it, because what was happening, especially in the beginning of the pandemic, there was so much fear mongering from everyone because no one knew what was going on. And the CDC was misreporting numbers and labs were misreporting numbers to the CDC, and it was exacerbating. And so no one knew what was happening. And so I was fortunate to have a little bit of a background in reading these studies and peer-reviewed articles to be able to provide internal commentary, which I then, as an attorney, gave a ton of CYA to, of, I may not know anything, so don't listen to me, but here are my thoughts
Right.
based on this.
Right. No,
So
I mean, that's incredible. Yeah, I mean, I saw that you had that background in the epidemiology, and it's just what an amazing, turn of events for you to have that sort of background at the
yeah,
same time you're dealing with everything.
it wasn't an exciting time for me when I worked at that firm. So, but I'm glad I had the experience at this point.
Right. Yeah, that's wild. What how hard was it to get the individual operators, the presidents, how hard was it to get them to move from brick and mortar to digital? And was that one of the greatest challenges? Because I'm sure they were struggling with that.
It wasn't difficult to get anyone to move. Everyone wanted to. The issue that we ran into is, how do you develop the right infrastructure to support that while also protecting against liabilities that are now created by franchisees doing virtual workouts and their members are working out at home. So does their insurance policy cover it? So we had to work with our carrier to get coverage extensions. And then we partnered, I worked really closely with ClassPass, the Fritz Landman, the CEO, and I do a lot of work together. He's a phenomenal guy, and they offer their platform free of charge. Hey, use us for virtual streaming. Now they get a benefit of pushing people into their ecosystem, but the franchisees got the benefit of using their virtual infrastructure if they wanted to do their own direct stream versus just using the corporate created virtual programming. And so we were trying to create as many resources for them as possible. And then Anthony, if anyone, one thing to know about Anthony, Anthony's a fighter, the founder of Xponential. I mean, he is a tenacious individual. And so for him, as frustrating as the pandemic was, it was really an opportunity for him to figure out, how do I clear another hurdle? And so he instilled a lot of confidence in the system on how do we continue to operate and not just shut down? Because you had a lot of fitness concepts that just shut their doors, didn't do virtual, and we've worked with a lot of them. I'm in communication with a lot of them. They just couldn't make the pivot in time. And now everyone's kind of migrated there. It just took them a lot longer, whereas for us, it was almost overnight. And we started using the messaging of, we are moving from a physical to a virtual. Business is still open. We're still here to service our members. It's just, we're doing it virtually instead of inside of our physical locations.
Right. Well, and you brought up Anthony, and so it's Anthony Geisler, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Who started the company in 2017, but he also started LA Boxing, which then sold to, was it MMA or no,
to UFC? Yeah, it became UFC gyms.
Yeah. But one of the things I found interesting about the organizational structure is that, against, I think, a lot of others in your industry and certainly within the franchise world, he wanted to keep a very small org chart just to support each new acquired brand. So just assigning a small team of people to that each acquired brand. Do you think that's what helped you be as fluid and as quick to react?
Absolutely. So there's a phrase, structure must submit to spirit. He's never used it. It's a phrase that I've heard used a lot of times. He doesn't want structure to ever get in the way of fluidity and the ability to execute. And so he wanted to create a constant, nimble, and agile program. And I think he did a good job. And the people that he hired, to run the brands, I think they are very much in line with his mode of thought. Very quick to execute and to turn on a dime when needed.
Right. No, that's incredible. I mean, don't ever let structure get in the way. I think I'm looking at the names of the people who are attending right now, and I know there's a strong belief in that, and that's great that he established it that way in 2017 with no foresight that this was going to happen, but obviously with the ability to navigate quickly when it did.
Yeah, but he always says tongue in cheek, it's because he really wanted to be able to sit and watch the beach or watch the ocean come in. I mean,
Right.
he says that tongue in cheek. He'd be bored as shit to actually do that.
Right.
But yeah, it's a great system to be part of.
No doubt. So we do have our first question, and I've been told the chat function doesn't work, but Q&A definitely does. So the first question we have is, did you have to modify the membership dues, or was there much of an impact to membership numbers overall?
So there definitely was an impact on membership numbers. I'd love to say we didn't lose a single member. We absolutely did. The membership dues, though, weren't franchise to franchise. They get to make the decision, but our policy wasn't to modify much because we were providing a similar to the same level of service. And then in a lot of states, they opened up quicker with restrictions, or we moved outdoors. Especially with some of the concepts like row house, club Pilates, you can do floor Pilates, Pure Barre, you can basically do that anywhere. We continue to create that hybrid service, so we tried not to modify membership fees.
Right. So as COO, you've said one of the core functions you serve has been to identify and steer owners towards key relief efforts, like, helping them. Now, did you get involved personally in helping them renegotiate leases, like as the corporate entity or as the parent company?
Yeah, we very much did. Adam must have been doing, I was curious in the height of it. We use G Suite, and I looked at his email volume, and then I looked at his calendar. He was sending 200 plus emails a day, plus doing at least 10 hours of calls a day that were scheduled, not to mention texts, other people on his team. Yeah, we were directly in there with the franchisees. Some took more advantage of our partnership than others, but we were absolutely offering everything we could. And I supported Adam during a lot of that. I've known Adam for over a decade. We were friends before he worked at Xponential. He's a genetic freak. He's a 10-time All-American sprinter. He was a professional rugby player, an Olympic hopeful, et cetera. He's a high character, high caliber guy. Right. And so he was the right guy to be in that role at the time.
Wow. So you mentioned you have a law degree. You served as an attorney, which we won't talk about too much. But I mean, that's what you studied in college, obviously. And then I think it was during that same period of time, because I'm fascinated by your story here, you also became a 3-time national champion powerlifter. Was that while you were in college?
Yeah, while I was in college. So I kind of lucked out, and anyone up here or anyone listening, my dad was a world champion powerlifter. My dad was one of the top strength athletes in the 80s and 90s out there. So I grew up around some huge names. There's some guys that are still out there today doing it. So my dad used to train or compete with guys like Ed Cohn. Joe Carini was his training partner for 11 years. Joe's a monster. I actually, when I was working for D1, I was meeting with LaDainian Tomlinson, and LaDainian was actually trained by Joe. And so we got to swap stories, because Joe is, if you're friends with him, he's the nicest guy on the planet. If you're not friends with him, he's the meanest guy on the planet. And he's a huge individual. But yeah, so I grew up competing. I grew up in the gym. Fitness has been in my blood. It's funny, I worked at D1 for 8 years, and I'm not a sports guy. I don't really watch a lot of sports. I'm married into an Oklahoma family, so I'm part of the OU legacy now, I guess. But I never watched. I just love training. And so I, even to this day, I talk training with some of the pro athletes that I worked with at D1. That was my fascination. And my last competition was probably 4 years ago. I took 7th at the American Open. And for me, it was all raw competition. So no equipment, just the belt, no squat seat. There's lots of crazy equipment out there these days.
Right.
But yeah, I love it. And actually, when I was leading D1, we had corporate workouts that I made the entire team do. Now with Expo, it's a little too big to do that. So we have basically a Slack channel dedicated to fitness. And so we are constantly talking training on that
Right.
every day.
Well, I just love that. And we'll get into the people side of what you do and how you coach people and how you bring people along as a leader. But I love how the personal and professional lives merged. You know, you're doing
I was
what
very lucky.
super lucky. And I'm curious, did you seek that out? I mean, did that just happen, or did you, actively go look for it?
It was very serendipitous. So I like to say it pays to be nice to everyone. And when I was in law school, my 3rd year of law school, I was going in and I was student bar president. I gave a tour to the law school of a kid coming up from Nashville, Tennessee. We ended up becoming friends. Fast forward years later, I'm starting my own law firm with my actual training partner, who was my mentor in law school. He was the president of the Chicago Bar Association, kind of a who's who of Chicago attorneys. And I was seeking out clients, and I reached out to my buddy Mike, who I gave the tour to, and he knew the founder of D1 from college. And he introduced us. I flew down to Nashville. I pitched him to be a client. And then 6 months later, I actually moved in-house to work for them because it was this natural marriage of law and training. And so it was a great fit. Will, the founder of D1, it was love at first sight. I think we were holding hands before the end of lunch. And I ended up really excelling in that environment and with that team. And I was really fortunate to have been able to meet them. And it wouldn't have happened had I not given a tour to this kid. And he and I stayed friends. And, I was kind to him. He was kind to me. And we still talk to this day.
That's such a natural fit. And I mean, yeah, like you said, very serendipitous.
Yeah.
That's great. So a couple more questions from the group. How many cancellations would you say you lost during the last year as more individuals started adapting to working out at home?
So I can't actually disclose the direct number, but that said, it's not as massive as you would think. If you look at this, working out at home has been available since the late 70s, since Nautilus came out. Home workouts are great, but you can't get away from the need for a partner, whether it's a single training partner or a community like a group class. And so people are committed to their community. And so we have found our members to be pretty sticky. Doesn't mean they haven't canceled, but I think a lot of people that have canceled are going to end up finding their way back, whether it's to us or to another brick and mortar concept while they still have their Peloton or something like that at home.
Right.
Great. More power to them. I have no problems with it, but brick and mortar fitness is not going anywhere.
So the other question that we have from the field, how difficult, I know it was Adam that was doing it, but maybe, how difficult was it to negotiate out of the lease contracts or even reduce? Because it sounds like a lot of them were reductions.
Yeah, most were reductions. There were very few actual cancellations. We haven't permanently closed a store yet. So, we reload a few locations based on economics during the pandemic, but we haven't officially closed. The majority of landlords were actually pretty congenial because they know they need to keep people in their spaces. We are an experiential program, so we're not going to be Amazoned away. We attract more of an affluent clientele because of the cost of boutique fitness, and they need that. most landlords see that as a high value, plus we're a special purpose build out. So the cost to repurpose our space for something other than what we are would be, it's just another expense plus lost rent. And in large urban areas or in a lot of states, there were moratoriums on evictions or penalties for commercial that lasted longer on the residential side. And so we had very favorable conversations. I think most of our partners really approached it like we are partnered in this business, because to an extent, you know, I liken it to us in the point of sale program we use, Club Ready. We're not in the software business directly, but we're in the software business because we have several thousand locations on this one piece of software. The landlords are maybe not directly in the fitness business, but they're partnered with our franchisees because they've got TI dollars in there, they've got residual value coming in, they've got debt covenants with banks, so they have a vested interest in making sure our franchisees stay in there and are able to recover. And they know our franchisees aren't asking for it just because they want to pay less or to defer out. It's just the nature of the pandemic is the revenues are sliding down. We found it to be a pretty amicable process. You run into some hard asses every once in a while, but that was not common. I think everyone was great to work with.
Yeah. Well, and another interesting thing, I listened to the GSD podcast that you did with Mike Abramson, and you talked about working on legislation that you were trying to get passed, but you were working with competitors. You were working with Orange Theory and other competitors
Yep.
to help push that legislation. Would that relationship ever have come up, Mike, prior to the pandemic? I mean, did you guys
No
talk?
way. I mean, there's the leadership teams are always connected to an extent. The Dave Longs of the world will always text here and there with the Anthony Geislers of the world, but we would never have been so enmeshed as we are now. I still meet with all of them every Tuesday. I hosted a clubhouse 2 weeks ago, had the founder of Anytime, Chuck Runyon, on there, Dave Long, the founder of Orange Theory, the COO of Solid Core, the CEO of ClassPass. I mean, we had lots of competitors come together. The legislation's actually on the House floor right now. It's House Resolution 890. We've got 63 co-sponsors so far. We're still fighting the good fight to get that going. But yeah, we are working hand in hand. Because for us, it's not about whether or not Orange Theory wins and Cyclebar loses. It's the fitness industry needs to win, and we will all benefit from it. And so there really is a team mentality to it. And I found some really humble spirits in guys like Chuck Runyon. Chuck's been absolutely phenomenal to work with, always willing and wanting to jump in and support.
That's great. That's great. Yeah, I was really curious about that because I think what this did was it definitely brought people together that otherwise wouldn't be brought together.
Right.
Which is cool as long as we do something with it, I guess, going forward.
Right. I think we'll have a shared sense of community that will not go away for a long time. We probably won't speak as often as we do, but I think there will be more cross company efforts that further the fitness industry.
Right. So a couple more questions from the field, and then I'll go back to this. But how and what technology did you leverage during the COVID transformation, if you know?
So, Abdel, can you get a little more specific as to what what area you're looking at? Because we had to pivot on a lot of different platforms on how we were using them. We tried not to introduce a ton of new technology because it just increases the learning curve and education points for us. But I'd love to see, I'd love to speak specific to an area of the company that you're interested in.
Okay, and we'll let Abdel add that to the question. And from Paul, it sounds like your model centralizes some shared functions while allowing the brands autonomy. Can you describe how you split who owns what function or how that is structured?
Yeah, the simplest way I think to look at it is if it drives revenue and franchisee growth, you want that to be directly with a brand. If it's brick and mortar development, so say construction management, or site selection, lease negotiation, things like that, that's going to live at the Expo level. All the marketing and the sales live at the brand level. We're creating a space where the brands can really focus on generating revenue and then retaining the revenue that gets created. Expo wants to pick up the back end, unsexy blocking and tackling.
Perfect. And let me know if that doesn't answer the question. And then from Jim, do you see ClassPass concept growing post-pandemic?
Oh, absolutely. Because they've got some unique offerings that they're putting together. They have things like co-membership models that they're beginning to sell, where they wanna align with a brand. We started doing it a little bit with them. I know they're doing it with Blink in New York, where they're not just selling ClassPass offerings, they're also selling memberships to the programs. Because what they've found is statistically, if someone is using their ClassPass credits more at one brand, it's okay for them to buy an add-on access through ClassPass to keep accessing it while still maintaining a level of ClassPass membership. They don't see that being competitive, and they effectively act as an outsourced sales program for franchisees or fitness locations. I think they're going to continue to grow. I was actually just on the phone. That was the call I was wrapping up before I got on here, Alan. I was on with Fritz because he was talking about some new developments. I think you're just going to continue to see them grow.
Nice.
Their newest model is, in my opinion, really good. It's a dynamic pricing engine. So it's based on selling excess inventory in locations, and then they have machine learning and AI, which it's a very sexy industry speak that no one really knows what it means. So if somebody hits a computer button, it does it. That then tries to price access to a workout based on the actual demand of that time slot, that teacher, etc. So it has a strong accretive value gain for the local studios.
Right. Okay. And then Jim, follow-up question here said, I assume your entities will partner further with ClassPass then?
I would assume so. I can't give you a hard yes. Me personally, I'm bullish on ClassPass. Every brand gets to determine their level of involvement, but we have an exclusive relationship with ClassPass, so we won't let any of our franchisees work with GymPass or PeerFit or any of the other programs that are member aggregators, because we think ClassPass is best in class, and we want only to have best in class in our system. So I do think you'll see that to continue to grow.
Excellent. So as a people leader, Mike, and back to your transition from being an attorney to, getting to where you are today as COO of, Xponential, as you're leading people through their own career, which I know you've done, how do you advise them? I mean, yours was serendipitous, but if you see somebody's in the wrong place or the wrong fit in your own organization, how do you guide them towards a better fit, or how do you guide them out?
So I think you have to approach everything with a bit of empathy and objectivity. I was having drinks with some friends yesterday, and they were asking me about this because I was telling them I've had the unfortunate opportunity to have to terminate people that I was friends with, or to manage people that I've been friends with. And I actually try and use really distinct language where I'll say, and it sounds really cheesy, but I'll say, I've got the friend hat on right now, and I've got the boss hat on right now. And so we can have very clear separation of who's communicating what, because I think that's important, and they get to decide how they hear it. What you want to do though is first, let's try and keep everyone as much as possible and develop their skill set. I'm a big believer in how do you multiply the talents of someone, so give them opportunity to grow. If they're just clearly a bad fit in the organization or the culture, I think that's where you have to figure out, how do I give them a pathway out of the company that helps land them somewhere that will be a much better fit for them? And so I think that's where it's really important to have the friend hat, boss hat conversation. And I've helped refer people that I've let go into other companies. And I've been very clear with the other company, this is not a competency issue. It's not a character issue. It's a bad fit, and they're for what their skill set is, and there's no space for them to excel in, or there's no more professional opportunity for them at the company. And so I want to help them end up somewhere where there is professional opportunity. And so I'll go to bat for the guys, and then I typically I try and protect my direct team from outside influence. You know, I want to be a filter. I absorb a lot of the slack and tension that's created in growth businesses, where it's constant move, stop, move, stop. And so I have to try and absorb a lot of that so that your team doesn't get whiplash on what's going on. So
excellent. We just got a nice comment from our buddy JK.
He wishes he was this good looking.
Question from Darren. I'm interested to know what tools, training methodologies you use to coach, mentor your franchisees through the last year, and how did you manage, through the panic and fear? Big question.
So let's start backwards for a second. Panic's typically created by fear. And so our focus was, how do we dispel fear in the system? You've got Wall Street saying brick and mortar fitness is never coming back, which is horseshit. Peloton's going through the roof. Totally get it. It's not a surprise, right? And so helping to cast the vision, I think this is where Anthony really excelled, casting a vision of what the go forward looks like so that they can have confidence in the fact that we will continue to be there to support them so they can continue existing. We are pulling out all the stops to do what we can to protect them from the arrows that are getting shot by the pandemic. So you decrease the panic, because we talk about the pandemic. I use the analogy of a roller coaster. The pandemic's a roller coaster, right? The only people that get hurt on roller coasters are the ones that jump off before the end. And so trying to help them focus on sticking through the scary part of the roller coaster so that by the time we get through it, they can actually emerge, because the rest of the industry kind of leaned back, and we're going, if the rest of the industry is leaning back, we need to lean forward because they're creating space for us. This is the time to start scooping up, everyone else. And particularly when you're part of a larger ecosystem like Expo, unfortunately, the mom and pop shops don't have the luxury of our backing. And so those mom and pop shops start shutting down, and it starts creating more and more gaps in markets. Expo and our brands aren't going anywhere. And so now we're saying, okay, let's lean forward. Let's double down on our investments in virtual. Let's start creating better certifications for our team and creating virtual certification programs for Pilates instructors and Pure Barre instructors and things like that, so that they can continue to service their members locally, and so they don't lose that community touch point. And as far as methodologies, I'm a big fan of EOS. For those that don't know, EOS it's called the Entrepreneur's Operating System. There's a great book, Traction by Gino Wickman. It's a very simple process, but it's really a focus on consistency and then actually attaching real executable steps to a vision. their big thing is vision without traction is hallucination. And so, you know, it's kind of a play on the a dream without a goal, or I can't remember how the saying goes now, but a goal without a plan is just a dream.
Correct. Yeah.
Right. And so creating consistency for our franchisees, so having those regular touch points with Anthony, having our sales team and our presidents do even more reach out with our franchisees to let them know what we're seeing, staying in touch with ClassPass, because ClassPass is international. And so the Asian markets, we were seeing what was happening in the Asian markets, and Fritz is telling me their performance there and what's happening. And we were about 6 weeks behind, particularly in the beginning of the pandemic. So we can set the vision for, hey, here's what ClassPass is seeing in China right now, or in Japan. And we can expect to see that in about 6 to 8 weeks. And it was like clockwork, where the first several months we were on the 6 to 8 weeks out on the heels of what was happening in the Asian markets. And I don't think other fitness programs were really leveraging the data available to them like we were.
Right. Yeah, and that's the other interesting thing. I mean, you being an operations person, you know, you really look at metrics and you look at ways to refine and improve everything. What are some of the things that you look at, Mike, and say, you know, that was one tweak, one modification that we made that really just had a widespread impact, and maybe across all concepts, but, you know, at least the ones that you hang your hat on?
Yeah, probably the most salient one on this is the virtual engagement from the existing member base. Looking at, once we pivoted to a stronger virtual offering, how much were our brick and mortar members engaging that virtual offering? Because you can then tie that to likely renewal rates on their memberships. And so that's the number one point that I think we were looking at, because everything from restrictions on how many people in a location to can anyone even come in, it was all over the place, that the one consistent piece we could have is access to the internet and, you know, direct contact virtually with our member base.
Yeah. Question from Jamie: Do you provide the training and development at the Expo level or at the franchise level?
The franchise level. Okay. So, or the franchisor level, really. And so Expo will provide whatever support mechanisms necessary. But like I said earlier, every brand has its own personality, and they have their own directors of education or their own national sales directors. And so we want to make sure that the brands are leading the charge on that, and we'll give them, we'll act as a sounding board, and we'll watch how it's working and help them augment when necessary so that they continue to be more effective. But the franchisors are really the ones that lead that, so the brands directly.
Got it. Okay. And a question from Abdel: a lot of times in crisis, companies focus on the very short term and, you know, have a hard time probably switching back to the medium and long-term initiatives. Did you see that with any of your operators? It sounds like you guys really focus long-term because you lean forward on the roller coaster.
It's a constant battle, Anthony. And so this is the difference between CEO and COO, right? Anthony is going, we need to keep the engine going. We need revenue coming into our franchise locations so that they can stay alive. I 1,000% agree with that. But I'm a little more long-term focused, and he would constantly tell me, Mike, you're building the ark, but the animals are drowning. And I would say to him, near drowning isn't drowning. So they haven't drowned yet. And I think it's important in any organization to have those countervailing interests come together openly so that you can have, you know, that marketplace of ideas, so that the best idea wins out, and both spectrums get vetted so that when it filters down, it's very clean and executable, and it benefits our franchisees directly.
Nice. So one of the things that we also wanted to talk about today, which I did hear you talk about on Mike Arcee's podcast as well, was resiliency. And, you know, I think you made the comment, if I wrote it down correctly, that you feel as though people just universally are losing their ability to be resilient.
Yeah. I think the American public is losing its natural resiliency. We're so rigid and so polarized as a nation right now. I don't want to get into politics. To me, it doesn't matter, but it's more in the fights that we're having and the vitriol and reactions that are coming, I think are indicative of the fact that we've lost our plasticity and resiliency, right? And we're so fragile that we can't, it's hard for us to come together and actually listen to each other so that we can take the best of all arguments and piece them together so that we've got a better product at the end. So a better nation, a better people group. And I think that's where, you know, at the franchisor franchisee level, you see it where, you know, the question was asked before about fear and panic. You know, people are afraid, and it's because they lack that resiliency, right? That idea that we can overcome this, especially if we're doing it as a team. I mean, Expo and every brand was trying to communicate, we are in this together. We have a vested interest in you succeeding and being around in perpetuity. That's number one. Number two, just on a moral level, we care about you as people and as partners. We don't want you to lose your life savings. We will help you however we can so that we can continue moving forward. But we need you to take a breath. We need you to actually look at what are the real world prevailing forces on you, and then how do we get past them, and at what point can we get past them? Because just because it feels like the world's falling apart doesn't mean the world is actually falling apart. And when you don't have a resilient spirit, you tend to crumple when shit starts weighing on your shoulders.
Yeah. No, it's so true. I mean, I think the comment that was made in the last one of these that we did, we had Stan Middleman, the CEO and founder of Freedom Mortgage, as our speaker. And he said, what we did as an organization was we identified the pandemic as one enemy. Whatever side of the aisle you're on, wherever your thoughts or beliefs are, that's the enemy. Let's go do what we need to do in order to attack the enemy.
And it was a great galvanizing force.
Exactly. And
you see in the fitness industry, you saw these competitors come together, and we're still together working. And so without them, without the pandemic as an enemy, it wouldn't have happened.
Yeah, better united.
Yeah.
So Trevor has a question. He said, I think you started talking about this with the resiliency topic, but what ways did your organization mitigate the challenges with the state-to-state policy differences in the lockdowns?
I didn't sleep for like 90 days because I was constantly on various legislative websites, Wikipedia, different newsletters, because of that epidemiological background. I unfortunately also then got tasked with helping to track the mandates that were going around and the restrictions. And I did it with other people, but I ended up being the tip of the arrow for it. And so we just had to stay nimble, and we were communicating like crazy with our franchisees, because they were looking to us every time a new executive order got rolled out from a governor. They looked to us on, how do I discern this? And you know, it's a fine line we had to walk, because we can't technically give legal advice to our franchisees, but we had to give them some sort of guidance. And then we're based in California. I'm on the advisory board for the California Fitness Alliance. Xponential, in the early part of the pandemic, we actually sued the governor of Arizona because we felt there were arbitrary restrictions. on gyms. We did not win that. And then we got involved, I got involved with the CFA, who wanted to sue Governor Newsom. And they kept asking me, what did you learn from suing the governor of Arizona? And I kept telling them, don't sue the governor of the state. You're not going to win. Instead, actually be more strategic and say, listen, if you don't believe he's got the authority to do it, tell your member groups, you know what, act as though he doesn't have the authority to do it. Use the money you were going to spend to sue him to protect your test cases that are going to get run through the court system. I ended up not being popular with the CFA because they were dead set on suing Newsom. And there's a lawsuit going right now on that, which is, not going to yield much fruit, in my opinion. This will all be over by the time that actually comes to fruition.
Yeah, until it'll be done by the time that sees the light of day, basically.
Yeah, or he'll be recalled.
Yeah. So coachability, you've talked about that a lot too, and just back to the people side of business. You said yourself that you don't consider yourself to be highly coachable. You and I had some exchanges on some of the books that we've read and things that we do to try to make ourselves more so. But when it comes to your team, when it comes to growing your team and advising your team and the people who work for you, and especially those of the franchises, because they're the breadwinners essentially. Mm-hmm. How do you go about that when you either identify somebody who's not coachable or somebody who is, struggling with that?
So let's start at the ground level with the franchisees. So if you have a franchisee who's not coachable, you can't get rid of them. You're stuck with them because they're a franchisee. You're not going to term their franchise agreement just because they're hard to deal with and they don't listen to you. So the strategy then is you have to make sure you change your tactic and ensure that they believe that your incentives are now aligned, that whatever you're asking them to do is directly aligned with what they are trying to achieve, because they don't always feel that way. Franchisors and franchisees can have tenuous relationships. We have good relationships by and large, but you run into ones that don't. As far as people on your actual team, I think you have to try and give them platforms to succeed so that they actually see you building into them and helping to create a pathway for opportunity for them. And whether that's giving them reins on small projects and letting them be successful and letting that project scope continue to grow. And then, coming alongside and, instead of being the boss that takes credit for their success, you applaud their success. You don't have no ego in it whatsoever. And you make sure everyone knows they did a great job leading that project. And I think you begin to earn their respect and they become more coachable. And even if they don't, you're still winning because they're succeeding on the projects. And if they are not succeeding on the projects, you are ultimately coaching them out of your system, because they're just not creating a compelling argument for keeping them on the team.
Right.
They're not a contributing member.
Yeah, it's kind of like what we were talking about with the common enemy.
Mm-hmm.
The common enemy can be the same on the flip side. The common hero. If they're succeeding and getting to where ultimately you want to be, just make that common. Don't make that individual.
Right. And I mentioned myself not being coachable. As I get older, I think I get more coachable. As a young guy, I'm still super bullish, and Kaiser can speak to this. I can be a real asshole talking to people. I try not to be, but the thing that's hard for people to deal with me is I say everything as though it's gospel, and I may not be right about it. I may not know anything about it. It's just my natural speech pattern is very confident. Doesn't mean I am confident personally. It just comes across that way. And so I have learned to have to pull that back because I was pushing so many people away that had valuable lessons to teach me, that I wish I had learned to do that earlier, because I would have been able to take advantage far more of other opportunities that I've had in the past.
Right. No, that's great. Yeah, I think that's so true. I mean, I think that's so true. And so you and I talked, like we said, a lot about books, and I want to cover that because there are books that I know you use as you're advising people. So I'd love to hear some of your favorites, some of the things that you've learned, some of the things that you've been able to implement,
Hmm.
and how those have transformed your leadership and your leadership style.
So I'm a big proponent of executive coaches. Um, I had an executive coach years ago. I stopped using him because he actually drove me to therapy. He said, "I can't help you anymore. You need to actually see a counselor." It's a true story. So I did, and got help. I'm fixed. I'm a perfect human being now. Um, when I was working with him, one of the books he introduced me to was called The Three Laws of Performance. It has become one of my favorite books on the planet. The first law of performance is how a situation occurs to someone arises in language. And there's this, it's this subtle narrative of how you, just the language you use, because what he was identifying to me is that I was actually unknowingly constantly using adversarial language. It would be an us against them language with my own team. Like, why don't they just do what I'm asking them to do? And I'm creating this adversarial gap versus actually realizing, Mike, you are taking them off of your team. And so Three Laws of Performance is one of my favorite books. There's a sister book with it that we talked about, Tribal Leadership. It's same co-author. I can say you don't have to read the book, just read 2 chapters on being a stage 3 and stage 4 leader. Stage 3 leadership can basically be distilled down to the idea of you having this narrative that I'm great, you're not. The reason I can't be successful is you're not doing your job. That is the most common narrative you have out there in business. I can't tell you how many times I run into this where someone says, even including me, sorry, I couldn't get this job done because this guy didn't do what he told me he was going to do. And it's like, that's not really the reason you weren't successful. Now, maybe that made it harder to be successful, but the fact that you're looking at it that way is already creating a gap in team. And so it's really looking at how you jump from stage 3 to stage 4, and stage 4 is effectively, we're great, our team is great, and the world is not. Stage 5 leadership's like Mahatma Gandhi, Jesus Christ, MLK, the world is great, we're all great, let's hold hands and create a better place for everyone. I'll probably never get there, but it's a great aspiration. The book Leadership and Self-Deception is phenomenal. It's an anecdotal book written by the Arbinger Institute, and it's this simple concept of being in the box and out of the box, and how you actually, it kind of ties to the 3 laws of performance. You basically manifest the results that you believe you're going to get by the way you perceive other people. And so in 3 laws of performance, it's called the default future, and in the Leadership and Self-Deception, it's called being in the box. And you put other people in the box with you, which you then trigger their behaviors to be typically negative. And so you don't get the outcomes you want. I love that book, Multipliers. I have so many books, and then anything Sean Acor's written, I'm a huge fan of Sean. I'd love to sit down and talk with him one day and just pick his brain. I'll go to Waco, Texas with him, and we can go to George's and have a big O and talk through, all of his insights, because I think they're brilliant.
No doubt. Yeah, I have a friend. Unfortunately, he's not on this call right now, but he was at a conference and he didn't know the guest speaker was Sean, and he actually didn't know Sean at that point. But he was sitting next to this individual. They were talking, they were having a good time. And then suddenly they said, "And please welcome to the stage, Sean Acor." And the guy sitting next to him gets up and walks up to the stage. And he's like, "I was just hanging out with, this
Like,
guy who I now..."
damn it, I could have asked him so many questions.
Exactly. But, one of the things that Sean does, which I think is so cool, is he tells people to, and I've told my son, I have a 19-year-old son, to do this. And it's just such a great thing to do. But when you're walking into something that you might be nervous about, or, you know, a test, or, you know, a conversation that you need to have, you kind of preload yourself with really great thoughts, you know, whatever it is that makes you happy, whatever makes you smile, whatever makes you just, you know, think of things that are much less nerve-wracking, or not nerve-wracking at all. And that just
Right.
makes that whole conversation so much easier.
Well, and then his follow on to that with before happiness, the whole concept of plan for success. You create an exit strategy, you're going to use the exit strategy. And so focus on the go forward versus the move backward, which most people look at, how do I create a safety net? And when you do, oftentimes you use it.
Right.
So I love everything he does. One of the things, back when we could actually be in person together, I used to go to used bookstores all the time and buy multiple copies of books that I love. And I'll actually, I've got a bookshelf in my office. I just, I give out books to people all the time.
Nice.
And I just let them keep them. So, you know, if I think someone needs help in a certain area, I like giving them that book and saying, keep it, take it, read it, you'll love it. Here are the takeaways that I think you'll have, but you go through it and see what you can get.
Yeah. Burn the boats. You know, I love that term. You know, you can't have an exit strategy, otherwise you're not committed.
Right. Good old Cortez.
Exactly.
Right.
So on one of those books you were talking about, you know, the stages of leadership, you're dealing with all age groups. You're dealing with entrepreneurs. You're dealing with these individuals who have like a high ego. When you know, we are leading people, we have different age groups that we lead. Do you find it more difficult, you know, for people that don't have maybe the maturity of age and experience and everything like that? Do you find it harder to lead them the way you're talking about than maybe somebody who has had more experience, or is that a myth?
To me, it's not an age issue, it's a maturity issue.
Yeah.
You find immature people, I'll be 40 this year, you find immature 40-year-olds in the workforce. If they're immature, yeah, I think it's a tough slog, and it takes a lot of relational deposits to get them to the point where they actually start listening to you, because they believe that you're on their side and they don't know everything, and you can actually help them be successful. That, to me, that's not an age thing. Where I find I haven't had the same experience I think some other people have had with Gen Z, millennial. I think I'm technically a millennial. I'm not really sure. I like to say I break the mold if I am. But people are people regardless of their generation. And if you can align with them and they believe you're invested in their success, they have no reason but to want to work with you and listen to you, especially if you are higher up in the company than they are, because there's a direct benefit to or direct correlation to the opportunity levels they'll see if they get close to you.
Right. No, it's so true. And I think there's a reluctance. I think so many people are coming out of this pandemic with a new fondness for helping others. You know, like we were talking about earlier, getting closer to your competitors. But if that wasn't the case prior to, I think people are somewhat tentative to trust or to feel like that person's being genuine with them in their efforts to want to help. So again, I think that comes with maturity and understanding.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah. I think it, but I want to make sure it's not heard as, you know, a 25-year-old versus a 45-year-old, because I've worked with 45-year-olds and I'm like, you are an overgrown child that is professionally immature. Even though you've seen a great deal of success, you still stomp your feet and have the I'm going to take my ball and go home mentality.
Right. Yeah, there's plenty of that. We don't need more of that. And I totally agree. I mean, I think, you know, it's kind of like what Sean Achor says at the beginning of Happiness Advantage. If we study all the negatives, we're not looking at the positives. And there's so much study into millennial, how to manage and how to lead these, these millennials who are just, off the rails and want to work from home and all of those things. And now it's like, okay, well, everybody's working from home now. So now what do you have?
Well, and I think of human beings, we're open source systems. We're not a closed system. And so we're permeable creatures in the sense of how I treat you is going to have a direct impact on how you live your life, whether to a small degree or a large degree. And so we need to make sure, and what you're referencing with the positivity aspect of it, that we just continue to build in a positive way so that everyone we surround ourselves with has that uplift just from being in your presence, because you're building into them. You're not thinking about how can I strip mine this relationship or opportunity for my own benefit, but how can I use it to serve other people? And I think you mentioned it at the beginning of the call with Jonathan. I think Jonathan takes that approach naturally in life on, hey, how can I actually help you? Who can I connect you to? What opportunities are you looking for? How do I get you access to this to accelerate your sales cycle? Whatever it is. I mean, he's the epitome of that mentality.
Yeah, no, it's so true. And speaking of sales, because I think this is also a key point. I mean, as we're coming out of this, and I know you guys lean forward, so I'm guessing you've already, asked or kind of advised your franchise owners, operators to do this. But the number one thing I think that's going to be in demand are salespeople. I mean, as we come out of this, if you don't have great salespeople on your team, you're going to be, woefully behind. Are you helping them in that area as well with hiring and whatnot?
Yes, most of our brands, depending on the size of it, we have different recruiting positions. The titles vary a little brand to brand, where we are trying to help build the talent pipeline for our franchisees, because we want to make sure that they are getting high caliber, hard charging people in whatever role they're hiring them for. But yeah, to your point, sales is going to be king, and then making sure people are equipped with the data to know that this is how I should be spending, because the natural inclination when you see a drop in revenue is I need to stop spending money on marketing. That's the first thing that goes, and it's no, here's some actual numbers. Here's where we're going to come alongside of you and spend our marketing dollars too, to supplement so that you get a bigger return for what you're spending in the market.
Right. Well, and I further to that, the other area that usually gets cut, which you've already talked about, you guys increased, is training. The fact that you guys went in and did, extensive amount of training on everything, and, the marketing piece, the training piece usually gets slashed. But again, you guys lean forward.
Right.
That's great.
Because for us, it's all, we do have the long play in mind. We're not going anywhere. Right. I mean, and so we just go, the pandemic, it's a comma, not a period. So we're going to get through it. And then on the other side of the comma, we'll, continue to develop our concept.
Right. We have a new question from Grady, and I want to encourage people, because we're probably going to wind down here in a minute. So Grady is asking, do you think salespeople will return to the travel and face-to-face, or since everyone has been virtually selling for a year, will this be the new dynamic?
I think if they're good salesmen, they won't have to travel as much as they did. You'll still see some travel, because there truly isn't anything that can replace a face-to-face meeting, but it's not a necessity any longer. I think people have been disabused of the notion of, I have to physically be in front of you. You might have salespeople that want to build into key relationships more, and they'll travel a little bit, or if they're having a hard time getting access, they may travel. Jonathan and I have a really good friend. His name's Todd Hartley. He owns a company called Wirebuzz. He is the king of video sales. He's actually one of Tony Robbins' business mastery speakers for video sales. He's phenomenal. And he shows us all the time different tricks on how you can really crush it with video sales make it personal, make it not cheesy, and have a phenomenal return on what you're putting into with that video sales process. And for high ticket items too, not just, come buy a $3 item off of Amazon, not just a simple, CPG, item, even for high-end services or bigger ticket products.
Now, is that a recorded video that he sends to people that he's trying to sell to, or is that like this where he's selling kind of via Zoom?
Both,
Okay.
but he likes doing lots of recorded videos, and he'll do it. He's got a very clear process on how he likes to approach it and tools that he likes to use for it. So I'd encourage everyone to go check out Wirebuzz. Todd Hartley, it's Hartley, is the guy. He's got it dialed down.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Mike, is there anything that you wanted to cover that we didn't cover? Anything that we should have brought up or should have talked about?
Just that we're better than Peloton. I don't know. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, no, I think we covered a lot of topics.
We did.
I really appreciate the opportunity to share and for you providing me with your platform, which is a very special thing, and for you sharing it with me.
I'm grateful for the time, Mike, and again, I want to thank JK for making this connection happen. So
Absolutely.
Thank you all for being here, and Mike, we'll be talking again. Hopefully we can do this live soon.
Perfect. Yeah, I'm up to it.
Awesome.
Thank you, guys.